Imagine this. You are standing at the edge of a high cliff. The wind cuts against your face, cold and sharp, like a reminder that you are alive. Below you is a vast drop, an ocean of air, where one wrong step would mean disappearing into nothing. And yet, you are calm. There is no fear in you, no hesitation, no trembling hands. You simply look at the horizon, steady and unshaken, as if you've made peace with both life and death. Now ask yourself, how many moments in your life have you felt that way? How many times have you stood before something uncertain, dangerous or unfamiliar and felt utterly fearless? For most people, the answer is almost never. Fear is not just in your mind. It's in your spine, in your breath, in the way your eyes dart away from possibilities too big for comfort. It's the unspoken master of your choices, the invisible architect of your life's smallest compromises. You don't take the risk because it's not the right time. You don't speak the truth because it's better to stay quiet. You don't follow the dream because what if it doesn't work out? These excuses sound reasonable, but they're not logic, they're fear wearing a mask of wisdom. Nietzsche once wrote, "The secret of reaping the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment from life is to live dangerously." Not recklessly, not stupidly, but dangerously. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of us don't live at all. We just avoid dying. Look closely at your life. How many decisions have been made, not from desire, but from avoidance? Avoiding loss, avoiding rejection, avoiding uncertainty. You may think you're making safe choices, but safety itself can become a prison, a padded cell where you never feel the sharp edge of life, yet also never taste its richness. And here's the paradox Nietzsche would shove in your face. The more you try to protect yourself from life, the more life slips through your fingers. This is not just about physical danger, it's about existential danger. The danger of thinking for yourself when the world tells you what to believe. The danger of walking away from a life everyone else applauds, but you secretly despise. The danger of being disliked because you chose truth over approval. But here's the haunting question. If you stripped away every fear that lives inside you, who would you be? Would you be someone entirely different? Would you speak in a different voice? Would you still have the same friends, the same job, the same routines? Think about it. Fear is not just a feeling. It's an architect, a sculptor, a parasite that shapes the architecture of your identity. You think you are you, but you are partly your fears. And Nietzsche's challenge was brutal. If you want to live fully, you must be willing to destroy the version of yourself that was built by fear. That's terrifying, because fear is safe. Fear keeps you predictable. Fear keeps you acceptable to others. Without it, you might become something unrecognizable, not just to the world, but to yourself. So here you are, standing on the cliff edge of your own existence. You can step back into the comfort of everything you know. Or you can take the leap into a life that may strip you bare, force you into the unknown, and demand that you rebuild yourself from the ground up. And here is the paradox that will gnaw at your mind long after you hear it. The leap that scares you most may be the only one worth taking. Because what if the greatest danger is not the fall, but the slow, unnoticed decay of never having jumped at all? We haven't yet answered the great question. We haven't yet uncovered why fear rules you so effectively. We haven't yet dissected the deep psychological and philosophical machinery behind it. But before we can talk about breaking free, we must understand the trap itself, how it was built, why you walk into it willingly, and why even now part of you wants to stay there. In the next section, we will drag that hidden architect into the light. We will see how fear seeps into your mind through culture, memory, and biology, and why Nietzsche believed that the only cure for it was a total rebellion of the soul. Fear has a strange way of disguising itself. It rarely announces its presence as panic or terror. Instead, it takes quieter forms: politeness, hesitation, perfectionism, just being realistic. It convinces you that it's helping you, that it's keeping you from making stupid mistakes. And perhaps the most cunning part of fear is this: it uses your own mind against you. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Fear hides in that unconscious space, shaping your decisions before you even realize you've made them. You think you're acting out of reason, but you're often just obeying the quiet, invisible commands of fear's architecture. The origins of the invisible jail. The truth is, fear is not purely biological, it's cultural. Of course, there's the primal wiring, the evolutionary instinct that once kept our ancestors alive when a shadow in the grass might have been a predator. That part is still in you. Your amygdala is still ready to trigger a flood of adrenaline at the faintest sign of threat. But most of your daily fears have nothing to do with survival. They're about social death, the fear of disapproval, rejection, ridicule. From the moment you were a child, society began teaching you its quiet lesson. Don't stand out too much. Don't challenge the rules. Fit in if you want to be safe. This was not taught to you in one dramatic moment. It seeped into you like water into stone. A teacher's frown when you spoke too boldly, a parent's scolding when you questioned authority, the sideways glance from friends when you expressed an unpopular opinion. Each moment left a trace, and over years those traces hardened into an unspoken rule that governs most of your actions. Stay within the boundaries. Nietzsche's diagnosis. Friedrich Nietzsche had no patience for these boundaries. He believed that much of what we call morality is simply fear in disguise, fear of judgment, fear of punishment, fear of being exiled from the herd. In his eyes, society did not want individuals who were strong and fearless. It wanted obedient members of the collective. Why? Because fearless individuals can't be controlled. Nietzsche argued that most people live in what he called the herd morality, a set of values designed to keep you tame, predictable, and safe. Safe not for your own sake, but for the stability of the herd. He once said, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. And the price for resisting the tribe? Loneliness, criticism, misunderstanding, which is why most people never resist at all." The psychological machinery of fear. Let's be clear. Fear doesn't just live in your mind, it lives in your identity. Every time you avoid a risk, your brain rewards you with a momentary sense of relief. That relief feels good. It teaches your nervous system, yes, avoiding danger is the right choice. Let's do that again. Over years, this reinforcement loop builds a habit, not just of avoiding danger, but of avoiding aliveness. Psychologists call this avoidance conditioning. Nietzsche might have called it self-domestication, the process by which you turn yourself into a safe, well-behaved creature who won't disturb the order of things. The hidden enemy. Comfort. Here's the great trick. Fear rarely shows up as fear. It often shows up as comfort. You don't feel afraid to quit your soul-killing job. You just tell yourself it's not the right time. You don't feel afraid to speak your truth. You just don't want drama. You don't feel afraid to chase your dream. You just need to be practical. But comfort, when weaponized by fear, is a slow anesthetic. It numbs you just enough so you never realize your life is slipping away. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that most humans are driven by the avoidance of pain, not the pursuit of meaning. Nietzsche saw this as a kind of slow death, a denial of life's raw, dangerous, and ecstatic possibilities. The deepest layer, your shadow. Carl Jung would add another twist to this diagnosis. Fear is not just about avoiding the outside world. It's also about avoiding yourself. There are parts of you, your shadow, that you've hidden away because they scared others, or scared you. Your boldness, your ambition, your rebelliousness, your capacity for anger. Somewhere along the way, you learned that showing these parts would make people withdraw their love or approval. So you buried them. And every time they tried to surface, you felt the sting of fear. Not fear of the world, but fear of your own power. This is why Nietzsche's blueprint for fearlessness was so radical. It demanded that you not only reject the herd's morality, but also reclaim every part of yourself the herd taught you to hide. We can see the trap now. Fear is not the loud scream you feel when something startles you. It's the quiet voice that tells you to stay in the life you secretly hate. It's the handshake between your biology and your culture, reinforced over years until it feels like just the way things are. And the longer you obey it, the more you forget what you were before fear started building you into a safer version of yourself. In the next section, we'll expose the unseen consequences of living in fear, not just on your own life, but on entire societies. You'll see why Nietzsche believed that a fearful culture produces not only weak individuals, but a weak civilization, and why the cost of fearlessness is high, but the cost of fear is far greater. Fear doesn't just whisper in your mind, it rewrites the story of your life. It alters your choices so quietly that you barely notice the pattern forming. You tell yourself you're just being responsible, but in reality, you're constructing a version of yourself that exists almost entirely within the narrow lines drawn by fear. The consequence: you wake up one day realizing that the life you're living is not truly yours. The personal cost of fear. The first and most intimate consequence is identity erosion. You slowly lose sight of what you actually want. When you choose safety over authenticity often enough, you forget the sound of your own inner voice. You begin living by borrowed desires, pursuing what you've been told to pursue, avoiding what you've been told to avoid. This is why so many people feel restless even when they have everything: the house, the career, the relationship, yet something inside is starving. Nietzsche called this the spiritual sickness of the modern human, the slow suffocation of the soul in exchange for comfort and approval. It's a life where the pulse is steady, but the spirit is flat. Fear makes you predictable. From society's perspective, a predictable person is useful. You don't cause trouble. You follow the rules. You don't disrupt the systems that benefit from your obedience. And here's the uncomfortable truth: much of the world is designed to keep you predictable. Think of how advertising works, not by encouraging you to be fearless, but by amplifying your insecurities. You're not attractive enough without this product. You're not successful unless you own this brand. Political systems work similarly. They win loyalty by amplifying fear. Fear of the other side, fear of change, fear of losing what little stability you have. A fearful citizen is easier to control. A fearless one is dangerous, not because they're violent, but because they're free. The silent spread of mediocrity. When fear shapes a culture, it doesn't just affect individuals, it infects the collective. Innovation slows because people are afraid to fail. Art becomes bland because artists are afraid to offend. Conversations become shallow because people are afraid to say what they truly think. Nietzsche believed that such a culture breeds mediocrity on a massive scale. When the herd values safety over truth, greatness becomes the exception, not the norm. He warned that when fear dominates a civilization, it produces what he called the last man, a comfortable, compliant figure who avoids struggle at all costs, living a long but uninspired life. The last man has everything except meaning, and he doesn't even notice the loss, because the culture tells him meaning doesn't matter as long as he's comfortable. The psychological trap of avoidance. Fear's most destructive consequence is that it shrinks your capacity to act over time. Psychologists have observed that the more you avoid something, the harder it becomes to face. Every time you choose the safe path, your comfort zone narrows. Eventually, even small risks feel unbearable. This is why some people, after years of living carefully, become paralyzed by decisions that once would have been easy. Fear has trained them to survive, but never to live. The addiction to control. There's another consequence that often goes unnoticed. Fear breeds an addiction to control. You start trying to manage every outcome, predict every possibility, plan for every scenario. But life is inherently unpredictable, so the more you try to control it, the more anxious you become when it inevitably resists your plans. This is why Nietzsche's fearless life was never about removing danger. It was about embracing it. To him, the highest form of living was not to avoid uncertainty, but to dance with it. The collapse of inner strength. The ultimate cost of fear is the slow collapse of your inner resilience. Courage is like a muscle. It grows only when you use it. If you spend your life avoiding fear, that muscle withers. When real challenges come, and they will, you may find yourself unable to face them. This is why many people break under sudden crises. It's not that the crisis is unprecedented, it's that they've never practiced standing firm in smaller storms. Nietzsche believed that voluntary struggle was essential to a strong life. Without it, you lose not just your fearlessness, but your ability to endure it all. The cultural chain reaction. Fear's influence is contagious. A generation raised to be cautious will raise the next generation to be even more so. Over time, societies become more risk-averse, less creative, less resilient. This is why Nietzsche saw fear not just as a personal failing, but as a cultural illness, one that, if left untreated, would lead to the decay of entire civilizations. A fearful culture produces followers, not leaders. It rewards compliance over courage, and in doing so, it slowly erases the very qualities that make a society capable of progress. But here's the paradox that Nietzsche insisted on. The cost of fearlessness is high. You will face discomfort, rejection, even exile. But the cost of fear is far greater. You will lose yourself, and the world will lose the person you could have become. In the next section, we'll enter the rebellion. We'll see how Nietzsche's blueprint wasn't about removing fear entirely, but about confronting it head-on, turning it from an enemy into a tool. We'll explore how to dismantle the invisible architecture of fear, step outside the herd, and begin building a self that no longer bows to safety. This is where the transformation begins, not with comfort, not with control, but with a deliberate choice to live as if fear no longer decides for you. Imagine waking up tomorrow and deciding, truly deciding, that fear would no longer dictate a single choice you make. No more, I'll do it later. No more, I need to be realistic. No more, what will they think? You would walk into that conversation you've been avoiding. You would quit the project that drains you but pays the bills. You would say no where you've always said yes. You would say yes where you've always said no. It sounds liberating, almost intoxicating. But Nietzsche would warn you. This is where the real danger begins. Because once you start living without fear's leash, the world around you changes. People may pull away. Systems may reject you. The herd may glare in silent judgment. That's why Nietzsche didn't imagine fearlessness as a pleasant stroll out of your comfort zone. It was a rebellion of the soul. Step 1. Stop worshipping safety. The first act of rebellion is not an action. It's a reorientation of values. You must stop placing safety at the top of your hierarchy. Most people live as if safety is the ultimate good. But Nietzsche argued that safety can easily become a form of cowardice. If you treat safety as sacred, you'll sacrifice freedom, truth, and authenticity to protect it. You'll silence your own voice just to keep the peace. The fearless life begins when you dethrone safety from its altar and replace it with something greater, becoming fully alive. Step 2. Seek voluntary discomfort. Nietzsche believed that struggle wasn't something to be avoided. It was something to be chosen. He admired those who deliberately placed themselves in challenging, even dangerous situations, not recklessly, but intentionally, to grow stronger. This was his idea of living dangerously. In practice, this means breaking the habit of comfort. Speak your mind when you'd rather stay silent. Try something where failure is not only possible, but likely. Walk toward what intimidates you instead of away from it. Why? Because courage is a muscle, and the only way to strengthen it is to use it. Step 3. Confront your shadow. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow aligns perfectly with Nietzsche's rebellion. The shadow is everything in you that you've rejected, denied or buried, your ambition, your aggression, your lust, your independence. The herd teaches you to hide these qualities because they threaten conformity. But Nietzsche saw them as raw, untamed energy, vital for breaking free from mediocrity. Rebellion means going into that inner darkness and pulling those disowned parts into the light. It means admitting, without shame, the full range of who you are. Because a self divided against itself will never be fearless. It will always be at war within. Step 4. Choose your own values. Most people inherit their values from parents, peers, religion, or culture. Nietzsche's challenge was to throw them all into the fire and see what survives. This process, which he called revaluation of all values, means asking, do I believe this because it's true for me, or because it's convenient for others? The fearless person doesn't live by borrowed commandments. They create their own code, knowing they alone will answer for it. That's terrifying, because it means you lose the comfort of blaming someone else when things go wrong. But it's also the only way to live authentically. Step 5. Accept rejection as the cost of freedom. If you decide to live without fear, you must accept this unavoidable truth. Not everyone will like you. Some will misunderstand you. Some will call you arrogant, reckless, even dangerous. Nietzsche never sugar-coated this. He believed that greatness requires a willingness to be misunderstood, sometimes for an entire lifetime. And this is where most people falter. They want freedom, but they also want universal approval. Nietzsche's rebellion asks you to choose. Step 6. Turn fear into fuel. The final step is not to eliminate fear entirely. That's impossible. Fear will always arise, but instead of letting it stop you, you use it as a signal. Fear becomes the arrow pointing toward what matters most. If it scares you because it threatens your comfort but calls to you anyway, it's probably worth doing. Nietzsche's fearless life wasn't about becoming numb to danger. It was about feeling the fear and moving through it, letting it sharpen you rather than shrink you. History offers countless examples of people who lived Nietzsche's rebellion. Socrates refusing to stop questioning Athens, even when it cost him his life. Galileo challenging the church's worldview, knowing he'd be silenced. Artists, writers, activists who risked reputation, freedom, even survival, because they valued truth more than safety. These weren't reckless thrill-seekers. They were deliberate risk-takers. They understood that a life lived entirely inside the lines might be long, but it would never be truly lived. You might be thinking, this all sounds noble, but I have responsibilities. I can't just throw my life into chaos. Nietzsche would agree you don't need to abandon your life, you need to transform your relationship with it. Fearlessness isn't about burning every bridge. It's about refusing to build your life out of fear's blueprints. It's about looking at every major decision and asking, if fear had no say in this, what would I choose? Now the picture is clear. We've seen the cliff, we've studied the trap, we've traced the cost, and we've planned the rebellion. But there's still one final step, the deepest truth Nietzsche wanted you to see, a truth that makes sense of every struggle, every risk, every act of rebellion, a truth so unsettling and liberating that once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's where we go next, to the ultimate realization, the one that will not only free you from fear, but redefine what it means to live. Imagine you've taken the leap. You've dethroned safety. You've embraced discomfort. You've confronted your shadow. You've chosen your own values. And you've accepted rejection as the inevitable price of freedom. For a while, it feels like standing in sunlight after years underground. But then something strange happens. The high of rebellion fades. The thrill of fearlessness becomes ordinary. And you begin to notice an emptiness you didn't expect. That's when Nietzsche's final and most dangerous truth steps out from the shadows. Fearlessness is not the end goal. The real goal was never comfort or safety. It was becoming. Nietzsche didn't want you to be fearless so you could simply live more comfortably. He wanted you to be fearless so you could become more than you are. His ultimate vision was the Übermensch, the higher human who creates meaning in a meaningless universe. Not a superhero, not a tyrant, but a self-created being who doesn't wait for life to hand them a purpose. The fearless life is not about removing struggle. It's about choosing the struggle worth living for. The courage to affirm, life here lies the deepest paradox. The more fearless you become, the more you realize how fragile, unpredictable, and tragic life truly is. You see how much is beyond your control. You see how suffering is woven into the very fabric of existence. You see that one day, no matter what, you will lose everything. This is where most people turn back toward comfort. But Nietzsche's highest challenge is to stand in that truth and still say yes to life. He called this amor fati, the love of fate, not just accepting what happens, but embracing it, willing it, even if it's painful. To live this way is to stop bargaining with life. No more, "I'll be happy when things get better." No more, "I can accept this if it changes later." Instead, "I choose this, all of it, even the parts that hurt, even the parts I would never have chosen. If they are part of my fate, they are mine." The death of the old self. By this point, the self that once lived under fear is unrecognizable. The safe version of you, the one who made every decision based on avoiding loss, is gone. And with it goes the comfort of certainty, the false security of fitting in, the steady hum of background approval. In its place is something raw, uncertain, and alive. You no longer live for the herd. You no longer live against it either. You live according to your own rhythm, your own law. You've stepped into what Nietzsche called self-overcoming, the constant act of transcending who you were yesterday, the ultimate freedom. Here is where Nietzsche's blueprint turns almost spiritual. Fearlessness is not about invincibility. It's about freedom from the illusion that life must be controlled to be worth living. It's about standing in the chaos and saying, "This is mine, I choose it, I will shape it." When you live this way, the small fears lose their grip. Not because they disappear, but because you've placed them in perspective. Fear of rejection? You've faced worse. Fear of failure? You've failed and survived. Fear of loss? You've accepted that all things are temporary, and that's what makes them precious. The eternal recurrence Nietzsche offered one final test for the fearless life, a thought experiment known as the eternal recurrence. He asks you to imagine that you would have to live this exact life again and again for eternity. Every joy, every pain, every success, every failure, on an endless loop. Would you curse this fate? Or would you embrace it so completely that you'd shout to the universe, "Do it again"? If you can say yes to eternal recurrence, you have reached the highest form of fearlessness, because you are no longer trying to escape life. You are willing it in its totality without editing. The final realization. The final realization of Nietzsche's blueprint is both terrifying and liberating. You do not need a safe life. You need a worthy life. A life you would choose again, even knowing it will contain heartbreak, loss, and struggle. A life built on values you forged yourself, not ones handed to you. A life where fear is not the author of your story. In the end, fearlessness is not about leaping once, it's about leaping every day, not into recklessness, but into the raw, unscripted moments where you are fully alive, because the ultimate danger is not death. The ultimate danger is never having truly lived. A return to the cliff. So we return to that image from the beginning. You, standing at the edge of a high cliff, the wind cutting against your face. This time, you don't just feel calm, you feel grateful. Grateful for the risk, grateful for the unknown, grateful for the brief, brilliant chance to stand here at all. Because now you understand what Nietzsche was trying to tell you. Life is not a problem to be solved. It's a fire to be fed. And the only way to live fearlessly is to love the flames.